anyone joining in via the public opportunity to join in. This is the Burlington Electric Commissioners meeting for September 2020. And first up on the agenda is the agenda itself and whether or not there are any modifications or proposed changes.
Hi, this is Bob. I had mentioned I'd like to discuss a little bit the MacDonnell report. I think in looking at it now, it's probably not an agenda item, so we can just pick it up in other comments. Can you hear me?
Yes, and I did, Bob, I did reach out to the team and I believe they are prepared to answer some questions. Darren, can you let me know if you guys have been able to do that?
Yeah, we're happy to answer questions depending on the nature of the questions. If they delved into competitive issues, we may want to have an executive session around those, but obviously happy to answer in public session as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
Any other suggested changes or questions about the agenda? Okay, so moving forward, we have the minutes of the August 12th, 2020 meeting. If folks have had a chance to review those, and if anyone has any clarifying questions or substantive edits related to content, now is a great time to raise those.
Nope.
Move to accept as presented.
Second?
Yeah, second.
All in favor?
Commissioner Herendeen,
Aye.
Commissioner Moody,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
Commissioner Whitaker. Aye. Minutes passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Next on the agenda, we have the public forum. I'm guessing there's no one here from the public today?
No, no one's here from the public.
Okay. For anyone who might view this remotely, please know that we're always welcome to have you join us. Or if our meeting time doesn't work well for you, you can reach out to commissioners via email on the Burlington Electric Department website, and also, of course, reach out to BED staff directly. We next have the Commissioner's Corner. This is a discussion opportunity for Burlington Electric Commissioners to raise any items or questions that might occur and that would be helpful to discuss up front at the start of the agenda. Any comments?
Well, this is Bob. Yes, I did have some questions about the MacDonnell report and the response by BED. Is this the right place to do it? That was a question.
Well, I think
as
Darren said, depends on how much detail you want to go into, whether it might cross into competitive disadvantage territory or not.
Well, let me try, and I understand we might have to stop, but I doubt it. The basic issue I'm asking about is something I hadn't really thought about much, but it came out vividly in this report, which is how we do the balance between our own bottom line and the good of the state as evaluated using multipliers and other considerations. That seems to be kind of a dissonance in this report and then the response. So I'll leave it at that. What is our general policy about that?
So, do you want me to answer, Darren? That's kind of where I want to go into executive session potentially.
Well, I have kind of a general response, and I would say that when it comes to running the MacDonnell plant, we obviously are in a relatively unique situation relative to some of our other generation assets, because we're running that with two partner utilities with the joint owners. So we have ourselves, obviously, we have GMP, we have VEPSA. I think the goal with McNeil is to, operate, meet our needs, help meet our needs both from a power generation standpoint, reliability standpoint, and an economic standpoint. I think the report points out that there are state benefits to running McNeil that go beyond whatever benefits there might be to BED. And I think those include not only kind of forestry jobs and forestry economy support, but depending on how you account for some of the externalities, there may be a carbon benefit to that as well, which is essentially unpriced in the region but has a benefit. So just speaking generally, I think we run the plant to meet our needs and the needs of the joint owners from a economic reliability power generation standpoint, but it's clear that there are other benefits associated with the plant for the state and the region.
Okay, well, I guess I would ask, maybe this becomes closed session stuff. If we look ahead 10 years, because the timescale is kind of unspecified in this report and the response, do we think there's going to be any dissonance between the bottom line and these other criteria?
Let me see if I can try to answer that too, without veering too far into specifics. I think that there are benefits that McNeil provides, and we obviously invest in keeping the plant operating well. And I don't see personally any reason why we wouldn't continue to see the benefits to BED and to the joint owners over the time frame you're referencing. And I don't see any reason why the benefits to the state and the region would change. And I don't think the balance necessarily would swing widely. I think there will be variation year to year in terms of the economics and benefits of the facility. But that's my best attempt to answer in a very general way.
So I would say that the economics, the advantage to the state economy is just going to go up. I think it's the net bottom line on the utility that moves around over time with changes in markets, rules, policies, and things like that.
All right, well, I am getting into the woods now, into the weeds. So if you did an NPV on what you expect to see over the next 10 years, that would be positive? Bottom line?
I'd prefer not to answer that in open session.
Okay, all right, okay. I've hit the edge of the open session, closed session, so I'll quit for now and we'll decide later whether we want to do it.
Thank
you.
And I just note for the chair, I don't know, Gabrielle, if you can see, but it looks to me from the teams that Bethany's hand may be raised. I'm not sure if you can see that or not.
I cannot. Thank you for helping with that. I'm going to try logging in again now because our tech firm is trying to fix it. But Bethany, please feel free to weigh in.
Yeah, I was gonna. My question was separate from the McNeil plan. So if that conversation's finished, then I'll go ahead and ask my question. But
yeah.
Okay, you're
well,
done.
I do want to just.
Yeah, go ahead.
Stephanie, one moment. I do want to flag that. Let's leave this on the table for whether or not it would make sense to go into executive session to ask those more specific questions for now, and then let's move forward for the remainder of the meeting, and we can always during the commissioners check-in loop back.
Okay.
Bethany?
Yes. So my question was just about the IRP. We'd spent a lot of time talking about that at the last meeting, and I thought we were going to see documents before it was submitted, or I might have just misunderstood, but I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about it, and then it's not on the agenda, and nothing in here that talks about it. So I was just curious if there was an update.
Yeah, I also had I also never did receive the last, and at least what James was alluding to in an email, more important chapters of that before it got submitted.
James, you want to go ahead?
So I'm pretty sure that what I said was we would provide those if time permitted before the filing date. And we did try to provide all of them that we could before the filing date, but that the filing date was immutable and we had to meet it. Subsequently, I think you should have all received saying that information is now all available on the BED website in its completeness. Is that correct? Have you not received that?
No.
Okay, then I had asked that should be sent out, and it should have been. I will check and find out why it didn't go out. But the 2020 IRP is available both as a single document and as a chapter document on BED's website. But we basically just barely got it in, given the competing issues that were going on.
Bethany, did you not receive any of the documents for pre-review, or just some of the chapters?
I didn't receive anything, but there could be a reason for that related to my email.
I mean,
So
I got all the chapters up to a point where James said the last remaining ones, these would be the more important ones to look at. He was talking to somebody, and those remaining ones that I think were the last minute were the ones that I don't think we ever got our hands on. But
I don't
whatever.
think those
So-
got in the end. I don't think those got finished until Tuesday.
That would have been my guess as well.
And the other thing, Bethany, my guess is the files are large, and it is very likely that if you haven't seen them, you should have, and they're probably hitting a filter on your email.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I thought we were going to see, I was just, because I know we talked about it and then it just kind of fell off the face of the earth. So I'll check on the BED website then.
And I think it would be
Yeah,
helpful.
just like I say, if you have a email filter limit that you let us know about, we can watch for it. Because we were circulating the chapters that were done to both the IRP committee and the electric commission as a whole.
Yeah. And I think also for everyone on the commission, just a reminder that the IRP is not an approval for any specific decision that may need to occur in the future. For example, a power purchase agreement contract. It's more an approval of the decision-making process. So to that point, if you're like me and you were unable to read all of the chapters, within 3 or 4 days, James had said, please let's send in comments whenever you have them, because it's more the decision-making approach. And also, I think it'd be helpful during the October meeting. Could we have a presentation in terms of the overall outcome of it?
Sure. I'd be happy to do that. Like I said in one of my earlier emails, there's no bar to us modifying that document or anything else having met the compliance deadline. So that's why I had asked that the email be circulated to you all of it. It was available in its total on the website. I don't know why that didn't go out, and I'll check to find out, but it is available. And I'll send you the link to the Electric Commission.
Perfect.
And like I say, there's no limit to our ability to accept comments on that.
Okay, that sounds great.
Any other items as part of the open commission discussion right now?
I was going to have some questions regarding arrearages and some specificity about that if possible, but hopefully I'm guessing that may come in Darren's initial remarks anyway. So, but I do want to dive a little deeper into that if he doesn't touch on a couple things.
Darren, will you touch on that during your GM report?
Yeah, it's in the GM report, so we can definitely touch on it. And we have Emily on the line as well, who can perhaps add, as well as Mike Kanarick, maybe can add some additional detail as to how it's working in more in real time than what was in the report. So yeah, we'll definitely touch on that.
Great. Other items for the Commissioner's Corner? Okay, so let's shift over to General Manager's update and then financials. Thanks, Darren.
Excellent, thank you. Good number of items to cover here. First of which is that we did see, as Andrea will go into more detail on, a positive variance and a positive net income in the month of July, first month of FY21. And it's the first time we've seen that, I think, since we really started seeing the COVID impacts begin to hit in the in the late winter, early spring. So there are some of those some of the puts and takes in the July, monthlies are related to timing, but some of them demonstrate some positive trends. Certainly, I think with sales to customers, we've seen a continued greater than expected sales in the residential sector, although that's tapering off a bit now. And we've seen the commercial sector delta between what was expected and what's happening continue to decline. So we're getting closer and closer to the number for sales in the commercial sector that we would be looking for in a normal environment. So overall, I'm pleased with having a positive month in July. We need that. We need to have more of them and get to a positive outcome for ourselves in FY21. That's the goal. And our team is working hard to control spending and limit any expenditures that are not necessary, manage projects well. So appreciate everybody's work on that. We'll talk more about this during one of the items that's on the agenda, but I am excited as well about the Solar Research Center item that we're bringing forward, which is really a culmination of work over a number of years. This project was something that I was originally involved with back when I worked with Senator Sanders, and it was located in Williston at Global Foundries. And I recall going with the team from BED in 2017. We looked at it and we kind of talked about, wouldn't it be nice to have a facility like this in Burlington? And circumstances being what they are, the facility no longer was able to stay at Global Foundries. And we've been working, in particular, James, working a lot on this, working towards getting a partnership together to bring that research center to Burlington. And we have an item tonight that will help advance that and make that a reality. So I think that's exciting. I had in here just around the IRP, the one thing that stuck out to me very much and is a key point to me in the IRP analysis is the net zero chapter, which focused on looking at what our costs and benefits would be if we move towards a 102 megawatt system up from the capacity of our system today in response to a growth in electric use due to the net zero path, due to electrification of the heating and transportation sectors. And the positive there is that although there are costs that need to be accounted for, certainly in developing that additional distribution infrastructure and transmission infrastructure, the benefits to our customers would outweigh those costs such that compared to a business as usual forecast, the net zero forecast that was analyzed lowers rate pressure as opposed to the business as usual. So to state that more plainly, moving towards the net zero path based on the 102 megawatt system has a net benefit for our customers, for our ratepayers relative to continuing with business as usual. There's obviously more analysis to do on net zero, more analysis to do on future cases related to that. But as an initial analysis, that's promising, and I think it's an important point for us to be able to share more broadly over the next coming months as we continue to work on the IRP process and the public engagement process around that. Switching
can
to,
I
oh yeah, go
jump
ahead.
in for a sec? To clarify, that's really from the ratepayer perspective. That's a different analysis than what I was mentioning during our last meeting, which is a little bit more from a homeowner or a business perspective of what it would take for them to pay to upgrade their facilities.
Correct. That's from a ratepayer perspective. Yes. So we can say, I think with confidence based on that analysis, that moving towards net zero has a ratepayer benefit for every ratepayer in Burlington on that 102 megawatt system analysis. That's different than saying, what does it cost for you as an individual homeowner, perhaps to purchase an electric vehicle or purchase a heat pump, and what are the economics of that on the more micro level, as opposed to what the electric system benefit is for that.
Great, thanks. I just wanted that clarified. And that makes sense because you're having more kilowatt hours spread across, more people. So broader utility-wide costs can be shared more evenly. So that does make sense.
It was designed to sensitivity test ourselves to needing capital upgrades of the T&D system for at least the early stages of it. So, you know, essentially it's looking to see, does our retail revenue exceed the variable cost of serving an additional load when you consider that T&D improvements are necessary at some point.
Yeah. Thank you.
So shifting gears to the legislature, we did see S337, which is a bill we've been working on. I've talked about with the commission that would allow us to put a portion of our energy efficiency funds over the next 3-year period towards measures that reduce greenhouse gas emissions as opposed to just measures that reduce kilowatt hour usage. And that bill has passed in the Senate and House, heading to the governor. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to utilize that new provision to make some positive impacts on our continued modernization and evolution of our efficiency programs, and even make them more complementary with our Tier 3 efforts. So that's exciting from the legislative standpoint this year. I think we mentioned this last time, but I don't know if we had the ability to talk about the details because it was embargoed until the Economic Development Administration made the details public. But we are proud to have sought and received $550,000 in CARES Act funding from the Economic Development Administration. This builds on a prior relationship we've had with the EDA. They've been supporting our existing small commercial customer on-bill financing program. We've done loans through that program dating back to 2013. This new program is based on the CARES Act, offering 0% loans during the first 24 months of the program disbursement, and it's a revolving fund. So as customers pay back those loans on energy efficiency projects, we can continue to make new loans as we go. This was brought to the City Council, which unanimously approved acceptance in middle of September. It was after our last meeting of the commission. And this certainly will be a complement to our green stimulus programs, another tool in the toolbox to help customers. And in particular, we're focused on helping with ventilation needs related to public health guidelines with COVID-19, and helping customers who have a failing or failed heating or cooling system or piece of equipment, refrigeration, for example, be able to afford a more efficient replacement during a time when that funding might otherwise be challenging for a small business or a nonprofit organization. So great opportunity. $500,000 is for the loan fund, $50,000 for administrative expenses at BED. And in particular, Andrea McNeil and Chris Burns have been working on this from the finance and the program development side, and really appreciate their work on it. It's a very exciting development for us, and we'll hopefully be making some loans in the coming weeks, get our first loans out there as soon as possible.
Great work.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if Mike or Emily or Andrea, if any of them would like to give an update on this next item on arrearages, and then I'll finish with a couple of other brief updates. But if whoever wants to jump in.
Hey, I'm happy to start. With regard to what's called VCAP, the Vermont COVID-19 Arrearage Assistance Program, Burlington Electric customers are entitled to apply for financial assistance with their electric utility bill. They're also entitled to apply for gas, landline telephone, and private non-regulated water, which doesn't impact Burlingtonians. But as it regards their electric bill, for those amounts that are 60 days in arrearage, they can visit a portal that the state has set up on its website. And incidentally, we've communicated through bill inserts this month and through social media and Front Porch Forum about this availability. Folks can put in a request through the portal, and then we have some members of our customer care team who are in the process of being trained from the utility side to go into the portal, see which of our customers have made requests and for how much money, and then we would need to approve those requests. That process, it's a little interesting. Somebody on one of the calls likened it to the old saying we've heard, building the airplane while flying it. So they launched the program before all the pieces were in place about how the utility functions. So it was only yesterday that the state public service department had its most recent training that our director of customer care, Andy Higby, and one of our customer care reps, Katie Dory, attended to learn how to go into the portal to start approving requests. So we're just getting underway in regard to the approval of requests. So let's say a number of our customers made requests for X dollars. We're going in, we're looking at each one carefully. We're approving or not approving them. And let's say there's a total of $5,000 that's approved. The state would be sending Burlington Electric the sum of money equivalent to that which is approved for our customers. In terms of the frequency with which that money comes, I'm forgetting. Emily may recall, or Andrea, but that's a brief synopsis of what's happening.
Thank you, Mike. That's a lot of good, helpful information. I guess I want to get a little deeper. Has the state put any specific guidelines around that? What criteria are you using, or is the state using to approve or not approve? Is that based on length, 60 days arrearage? Is there a and if you're 60 days arrear, how much of a percentage of your bill is able to be shaved off through this program? And more so, what, as you go into those criteria, how does it account for, privacy? I mean, there are people out there that are hurting, but I'm sure there might be people out there that might want to gain the system as well. And I'm just curious as to what sort of specific criteria, qualifications, whatever, has the state given the utilities to work with to sort that out in an equitable way?
Sure, those are great questions. One document that I would direct you to that you can find on the Public Service Department website is a Q&A that I believe I'm looking at the most recent version of it, which was updated September 3rd. But it is a 15-page document that has frequently asked questions. And it talks about everything from the fact that residential applicants for electric assistance can get up to $440, whereas commercial, industrial can get up to $1,120. It sets forth a whole section about, they call it the formula. What is the formula for assistance? And it talks about accumulated arrearages greater than 60 days. And it goes through explaining maximum awards that can be received. And it's really detailed. It's 15 pages long. And I can share a link to the page on the DPS website as well as a link to this particular document. But I think that would answer a lot of your questions. But again, I'll defer to my colleagues to see if there are any other salient points worth adding.
I'll just quickly elaborate a little bit on some of the specific questions Scott had. So yes, there is a certification that customers are asked to make as part of the application process. They have to self-certify that they have experienced some sort of hardship related to COVID. But the utilities are not involved in any form of review or approval or denial of the self-certification. Our role is really limited to figuring out and confirming what amount of arrearage they're entitled to. The customers are not asked to put in any amount. They're just asked to provide supporting information that documents that they are a BEV customer, their customer account and location ID, I believe. They have to make an attestation that they have been harmed in some way by COVID. And then it's customer care who determines what amount of arrearage is eligible, that customer is eligible for under the program. So it's 60 days in arrears, but it's 60 days in arrears only related to services provided after March. So if your bill has been in arrears going back into the fall, you may still be eligible, but only for the part that was billed after March, if that makes sense. That's also 60 days behind.
Scott, did you have more questions?
There we go. Am I back? Sorry, just lost my train of thought. Right. I just oh God. So if you do choose to approve them up to $440 or whatever, is there a line that you make a decision that because you if you don't approve them for such that someone, and I'm talking more residential than anything, to get them to a point where they can see across the line, right? Get that arrearage down to perhaps a manageable point going forward, so that it doesn't happen again, or you get over that hump, but not. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of leeway to that is left up to your folks to decide how much they get and how much that puts them towards being back on track. Does that make any sense? I know that's a kind of a weird roundabout question, but
I think I understand, and I'll take a stab at it, but it's really Mike's area that's going to be implementing this in terms of reviewing. But my sense is that the guidance we've received from the department is that if someone applies, and then we are to look at the amount of in arrears qualified under the program, right? And if the total amount is 150, that's 60 days in arrears for services delivered after March, we approve 150. If their total amount in arrears is $1,000 for that same time period, we are only approving and allowing up to the max, to the cap per resident or per customer account. Does that make sense? So we're not looking at within the 440 and saying, oh no, we're only going to give you half of the 440, even though you might have 440 that's qualified. We're approving 100% of the qualified amount up to the cap.
Okay. So it is irregardless of how much that is as a total percentage of your bill, as a percentage of your total bill. Yeah. 440 could be the whole bill. Yay. Or 440 could be half of a $900 bill and not so much yay, but it helps you get to the goal, right? Is that the correct understanding?
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks. I just wanted to, just looking out for hoping that people can get back on their feet after this thing is done, so thank you.
Mike, I really appreciate that there's been information on social media and Front Porch Forum. I just looked at the Burlington Electric Department website, the My Bill page, and it says, it has a lot of different options here, but it doesn't necessarily say, it says payment problems and it says call customer service. I guess I'll just throw out there, does it make any sense to say, to have an additional line that says there, are statewide resources available, and to have that Q&A document there?
Yeah, I like that idea. We do have as well, you may not have seen it when you clicked into the website. On the homepage of our website, we have a banner that's scrolling, and one of the big banner images says behind on your bill, learn about available grants.
Yep.
Of course, there are other things clicking through, but I see what you're saying. If you click through to pay my bill, and I'm just doing that. Interestingly, I'll find out. This goes to our payment portal called paymentus, but I hear what you're saying. On our website, can we find somewhere else that would make sense to indicate to folks that there is assistance? And I'm sure we can, and that's something that I can easily implement.
Yeah, just because it is scrolling. I mean, now, of course, it's completely staying right there on my homepage. But when I first clicked in, I didn't see it. So,
yeah, but you make a good suggestion there, because the same thing may happen for one of our customers. They may not see that scroll by with 3 or 4 slides going, and we can make it even more prevalent. In fact, I'm just thinking out loud. It may even be that we can make it a permanent presence right there on the homepage and have like 2 banners, if you will, one which is static, and then the other banners can scroll through. But I think it's a great idea. The more we can let people know it's available, the better. And in fact, we did write about it as well in the North Avenue News, which just came out. It's part of our column, as well as an advertisement we put in North Avenue News. So we've really tried to communicate with folks, not only digitally, but also in print, because we know a good number of our customers get their news from the monthly North Avenue News, like I said earlier, from bill inserts. But that's a great idea. Thank you for that, Commissioner.
sure, and thank you guys for doing everything that you can with this. Darren,
Yeah,
I don't think you were done with your update.
Not quite, but I'm getting close, and I'll move along. I do just want to let the commission know that we've been doing some important capital work across our generation assets at McNeil, at the GT, and at Winooski 1. We are in the midst of the McNeil outage that would have taken place in April, but due to COVID was moved and is now taking place this month of September. Getting a number of things in place so that we hopefully don't hear, at least not too often, the term economizer too bleak ever again. And we also have been working to reinstall the turbine at the gas turbine at the GT, and we've also done a controls upgrade. We're in the process of that at Winooski 1. I just want to recognize that the Center for Safety team, working with the generation team, has done a great job making sure that as we have external contractors on site, that we follow a number of safety protocols. That we're wearing masks, that we're keeping distance when we can, and taking all the appropriate caution that's needed. So a lot of appreciation for the work that's gone into that and into those projects during this challenging time. I did want to flag as well, we'll be having the Innovation Cup for 2020, October 16th at 2 p.m. I've listed the great panel of judges that we have in the written report. And we're going to be doing it virtually this year, obviously, but we're hopeful that we'll continue to have strong participation. It's a great event, great opportunity for our employees to share creative ideas that can be implemented to further our mission at BED. And then lastly, I wanted to note, as you probably saw in reviewing the report, we're seeing a couple of things happening with our incentive programs that are noteworthy in my view. One of them is with heat pumps, with the green stimulus incentives. We've seen the heat pump incentive uptake increase dramatically. I believe when we had launched the heat pump program was back in September 2019. From that period through really kind of, just till a couple months ago, we had about 45 or so heat pump rebates. We've now doubled that and then some. And from what I'm hearing, there's actually contractors are scheduling out into the fall and even the winter, based in part on the demand for heat pumps. There's also, there's a cooling element to that as well as a heating element, given where we were in the season. But that's important, as well as the fact that in looking at it, of all of our EV rebates, and that includes the new vehicle rebates and the used vehicle rebates, and we only have one version of the used vehicle rebate. We don't have an enhanced low moderate income version of that because we've maxed out that incentive for everybody. But we do have a low moderate income enhanced rebate as part of our new EV and PHEV program, and a full 10% now of the rebates provided in that program have gone now to our low and moderate income customers. And that's an uptick significantly from where we were, previously. And I think it's an indication, at least in my view, that the state rebate combined with our rebates is beginning to move the needle on making some of those new vehicle leases or purchases more affordable for more of our customers. I think there's more that needs to happen there, but it was a positive development and something that I wanted to flag for the commission. And now I am officially complete with the report.
Okay, great. As long as no one on the commission has any follow-up questions for you, if we can shift over to financials.
Hi, everyone. I'll just share my screen here. All right, are you able to see the COVID impact graphs? Great.
Yes.
So I will start with those. So for the month of July, and I'll focus on July here and we can touch on August, but for the month of July, residential sales were up to 13.6%, while commercial were down 9.2%, resulting in a net down due to COVID of 2.8%. As we look to August, residential has come down a bit to 11%, and commercial this is actually supposed to be 6.3%. And that change from the 9.2 to 6.3 is driven primarily by the colleges coming back on. And that brings us to a net of 1.5%. And I will just scroll to the graphs breaking out the residential sector and commercial sectors. And these graphs are consistent with what we've been showing the last couple months. Actual for residential above where it otherwise would have been, and commercial is below. For the month of July, residential's up at 13.6% and commercial's down the 9.2%. Does anyone have any specific questions on the residential or commercial graphs before I move to the net system graph?
Nope.
Okay. So the net system impact graph, it's nice to see it kind of coming back together by the end of August. And Mike added the college campus graphs below, which is helpful. And you can see that by the end of August, really these are kind of merging back to a normal range. So it'll be interesting to see how September looks, but it's nice to see as we get to the end of August, we're coming back to normal levels. Any questions on these? Okay, so we'll jump into the July financial review. So net income for the month of July was $77K, which is $134K favorable compared to budget, which is good news. I'll start at the top and work my way down. Sales to customers is relatively flat. Residential sales are up, offset by commercial being down. Other revenues are down. That's primarily related to our energy efficiency utility sales. Similarly, you'll see operating expenses are down roughly the same 100K. Power supply expenses are up 41K, and that is driven by higher fuel costs. Production at MacDonnell was up, and then that's offset by lower transmission costs. Operating expenses is below budget, 187K. So 100K of that is related to lower EEU costs. And then the other 87K is a lot of ups and downs relating to materials and supplies, transportation, tier 3, and miscellaneous outside service expenses, training expenses. A good chunk of that 87K is going to be timing, meaning in future periods we'll have an unfavorable variance compared to budget, but there's also a good portion that is actual savings, particularly related to some of our training costs are down in the COVID environment with everyone being remote. The gain loss on disposition of plant, this is completely timing. It is favorable, but it will come back. It has to do with when we retire our assets. So it's timing related, and we'll see this come back in August. We really do go through the process of retiring plant twice a year. And other income is unfavorable by 86K, and a good chunk of that is also timing related to unbilled revenue of work orders that essentially we do an entry twice a year, once at year end, where we book the unbilled revenue relating to work orders. That entry then reverses the next month, and if that revenue hasn't been collected, it shows as a timing difference in the month that in the month of July. So that will come back in the future. There is about 12K that's unfavorable that is related to interest income, because interest rates are just so low that our investments aren't earning much right now. I think that's the summary of the income statement. Does anyone have any questions? While these results are, I said timing a lot, it's still good news to see actual results favorable compared to budget.
Yes, let's see what it's like as schools reopen and
Yep.
our circles continue to widen, and you know what that looks like with COVID, really. So
Definitely. Moving to capital spending. So the budget for the year, 7.9 million. Budget for July, 1.3, and we spent closer to 0.3. So capital's down about $1 million in the month of July. It's all timing related to some timing of production and then IT forward. It has to do with the timing of IT forward. We just took IT forward spend and divided it by 12 for budget purposes, and in reality, it's going to be lower in earlier months and then ramp up as we get into the fiscal year. So that's largely timing here. We're planning to still spend that $1 million. Cash and investments at July 30th is 11.8 million. Budgeted cash was 10.4, so we're up 1.4 million. We did receive a $3 million ban in July, the bond anticipation note that was budgeted in December. So we all else equal, we'd be up 3 million compared to budget versus the 1.4. But the variance is really not related to July. It's relating to our beginning cash where we ended June 30th versus where we forecasted we were going to end June 30th at the time of doing the budget. So COVID impacts really playing a role there. Debt service coverage ratio of 3.52 and adjusted at 0.87 for the month of July. And this is calculated based on the last 12 months ending. So this is slightly down compared to where we were at the end of June. So all that really has changed since then is last July rolled off and this July came on, and residential sales to customers are down a little bit this July compared to July of 2019. So that's what's bringing these down a little bit. Cash coverage is 136 days. And that is up largely due to the bond anticipation note, as well as less capital spending for the month of July. Just making sure I'm not forgetting anything. Does anyone have any questions? Before wrapping up the financial results, I just have a quick update on FY20. So last month when we met, we presented the preliminary FY20 results, which showed a net loss of 1.25 million. As we kind of cleaned up the month, we're looking at a net loss of 1.2 even. We have 2 open entries, one relating to OPEB, and that's going to be favorable of about 10K, and one relating to our reg asset, which we're waiting on PUC approval for, and that would be closer to 200K. So should the PUC approve our request for an accounting order to record the reg asset, we would land FY20 at about $1 million even net loss. And we are still working through the audit. It's going really well, and the auditors will be here to join us for our meeting next month.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Any additional follow-up questions for her? Okay, so thank you very much. Moving forward, we have a New England Central Railroad contract. This is a discussion and vote. And Dave and Betsy, if you want to give us an overview.
Yes, Betsy's going to start out with the PowerPoint, and then I'll basically read the memo we sent to the commission. So I'll turn it over to Betsy to start.
Nice beard, Dave.
Thanks. It's my secondary filter.
Figure it out now. I want to share my screen. Whoops, wrong one. Sorry. Okay. So I wanted to give a brief history for everybody about the railroad contract. The original contract was signed in October of 1984, and it required us to take or pay for 171 trains per year. Because of economics in the mid-'80s, we were not running much and ended up having to pay for trains we didn't have. The contract has been amended 14 times since then, and Amendment 3 dropped the required trains to 110 per year. Amendment 4 dropped them to 108 per year, and Amendment 5 dropped them to 104 per year. We've remained there since, and we don't plan to change this because we have been meeting that requirement fairly easily. So the current amendments keep the trains at 104 required per year. James produced this spreadsheet comparing all 14 amendments. This is just a snapshot just to show due diligence that we weren't missing anything. If anyone wants this entire spreadsheet, I'm more than happy to share it by email. But I just wanted you to know that we compared all of the contracts and amendments to be sure we weren't missing out on anything. The current amendment that expires at the end of this month is Amendment 14. Again, it requires 104 trains per year, and it sets the rate increase following the American Association of Railroad Index minus fuel. The reason it's minus fuel is Amendment 10, which was signed in 2007, added a fuel surcharge rate dependent on diesel fuel prices. That varies by month. Currently, we're not paying a surcharge because of low diesel costs. And so the actual rate increases are based on national current railroad costs, giving us something defendable. This is an example of how it's calculated. It's on a rolling 4-quarter or 8-quarter basis. So if we were to calculate today's rate increase, it comes out to a 0.26% increase, basically flat. Now, the 4th quarter of September is not out yet, so that may change. The railroad contract goes from October 1st to September 31st. But essentially, right now, the rate would remain fairly flat. This is an example of the rate changes over the last 5 years of Amendment 14 when we were using this railroad index. And the average over the 5 years is just 1.8% change. Amendment 15, which is what we're asking to be approved now, changes the date of the agreement. It adds a 5 years to the agreement with the option of an additional 5 years by mutual agreement of both parties. No other terms of the agreement have been changed. So rates will still be calculated on this railroad index and still 104 trains per year. And the contract itself allows for termination by either party with a 60-day notice. And this is the same termination language in our new wood procurement contracts, tying both of those together. And I guess my only other comment would be that the railroad is the only show in town. We don't have a choice of who we work with. And so we don't really have a lot of choice, but I think what they're proposing is a good amendment. We've had good luck with them recently, locally and historically now it's gone very well. So if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Seems pretty cut and dry to me.
I have one question. This is Bob. 104 trains are required. The rates apply for any number of trains, including 110, 120?
Yeah, actually, there are 3 rates in the contract depending on the number of cars per train, but it doesn't change beyond, if 104 or 200 trains, it's still the same rate. A 21-car train is the same rate no matter how many trains we have.
As long as you meet the 104.
We have to pay for 104 trains.
Yeah.
And beyond that, the rates don't change. In some of the past amendments, they did, but currently the rates stay the same. They are dependent on, there's a rate for less than 20 cars or less, 21 to 23 cars, or over 24 cars. We have been able to do 24 cars, but that's not really feasible and not really safe. We average 21 cars per train most of the time. And Dave can read the resolution if there's no more questions.
It doesn't seem like there are, although I'll come back to the earlier conversation, although, it's a slightly different flavor. This is a separate, vote with regards to this contract amendment, but just to flag, Bob, let's come back to your questions from earlier. So Dave, yes, could you please read the resolution?
Burlington Electric Department Certificate of Public Good for the Joseph C. McNeil Generating Station requires 75% of all wood fuel deliveries be by rail. Since 1984, BED has had a contract with the New England Central Railroad for the delivery of wood chips. Contract has been extended by 14 prior amendments, will expire on September 30, 2020. The parties have agreed to another 5-year extension with the option to continue for an additional 5 years if both parties agree. The amendment continues at a rate schedule tied to the American Association of Railroad Cost Index. We have been operating under this rate structure for the past 5 years. Rates are tied to a national index of actual railroad costs. Using this index, the average rate of increase was 1.8% over the last 5 years. BED requests the Burlington Electric Commission approve the attached 15th Amendment at its meeting on September 9th, 2020, and sponsor a resolution to the Board of Finance for approval to enter it on the consent agenda on the next meeting of the City Council on September 14, 2020. BED staff will present virtually at the Board of Finance meeting on September 14, 2020 to answer any questions. Thank you for your consideration.
So before we move with that, Bob, do you have your hand up?
You're muted.
You're still muted, or you took it down. Okay. We do not have language to read off.
Oh, I got. I
wonder-
can come up with something here.
okay.
I move to
I
approve
mean, it's
the.
essentially approve a resolution, yeah.
Right. So I will move to approve attachment 15 to the agreement with New England Central Railroad, and as well move to sponsor a resolution to the Board of Finance for its approval of attachment or of Amendment 15.
Is there a second?
Does that work?
Sure, I'll second.
All in favor? Roll call.
Commissioner Herendeen,
Aye.
Commissioner Modi,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
Commissioner Wheelock, Commissioner Wheelock.
I think you mean Whitaker?
Oh, geez, what was I thinking? Sorry, I'm looking at Emily. Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Whitaker.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. And next we have James Gibbons presenting Solar Test Center Purchase Power Agreement. This is also a discussion and vote and relates to some of the intro that Darren gave in his update as well as in the report.
Darren, do you want to say anything or do you want me to go right into it?
I'll just mention that this is really a two-part process for us with the Solar Research Center. Part one being seeking your approval today, which James will give more detail on for the power supply arrangement. And part two being an item we're planning to bring to the City Council and Board of Finance on Monday related to license agreement for the use of the space in the McNeil Wastewood Yard for the physical Solar Research Center assets. So we'll appreciate the ability to bring the power supply piece of it here to the commission. And I know James has a few slides, so I'll turn it over to you, James.
Thank you, Darren. So I'm going to share screen, and then I'm going to hopefully switch to slideshow. And hopefully that worked. Is everyone seeing a proposed Solar Test Center Purchase Power Agreement slide?
Yep.
Yep.
So just a quick note, I apologize. This is one of the many things that was coming due on August 31st, September 1st. And what happened was this had been going on, as Darren mentioned, for quite some time. And the intent originally had been that DOE was going to pay to recommission this solar test center back in Vermont. They actually shipped the equipment off to New Mexico for storage, even though we offered to store it at McNeil. And things got really weird over the last 2 months with DOE essentially pulling out, indicating they weren't going to ship it even, finally agreeing to ship it, but then not pay for any recommissioning. And so there was some sort of last minute scrambling around, which Senator Sanders' office was tremendously helpful with, where we were actually able to put together a proposal that would work for this package. And this happened in basically the last week. So this last 2 weeks, really, given that it's September 9th at this point. So what we're talking about, for those of you who are generally familiar, and hopefully my cursor also shows, with the McNeil site, we had considered there were possibly 3 places you could put the solar test center. The first was in the ash pit. The second was this proposed site right here in the green field right off the Intervale Road. And the other site was in the, they call it the debris area. I think it was the Wastewood Yard. This site was discarded due to high pH content of the ash. It's tremendously high, so we were concerned about the equipment. This site was our first choice for aesthetics. Unfortunately, this site is 6 feet lower than the area up here, and therefore has water table issues, floodplain issues, and also the area bounded roughly by that field is an Indian archaeological site, and we were not able to do a ballasted array. So at this point now, we're talking about the Wastewood Yard area, and the next slide will show that in more detail. So this is zooming in to the Wastewood Yard. For those of you familiar with it, this is the leaf bunker that sits on the road, and this is the pile of the actual wastewood pile. What we're proposing is to add a fence that follows the red line, Access to the solar test center would be directly off the road through this portion of the fence. The solar test center panels would, the racking would have this shape, and the reason for the shape here is so that we didn't have any shading from these 3 large trees over on the Intervale property. We talked to them, but we didn't want to cut them, and we were able to displace the solar array a little bit to the west to avoid the shading from those trees. We will have to move the leaf bunker if the solid waste district continues with the use of the wastewood yard in the coming year. We'd have to relocate that. Access to the wastewood yard would remain down here, and we'd create a corridor to get into the wastewood yard. The McNeil access wouldn't change. This represents racking for 50 kW of panels. At the initial point, only about 25 kW will be occupied, though it will be permitted for the full 50, and that will allow putting additional test panels on if they become available without a need to re-permit the site. We're proposing this business structure, which is the solar test center would be owned by UVM. The equipment will be donated by Sandia/DOE, and it is going to be shipped back to Vermont at their expense. UVM has agreed to pick up the cost of installation and permitting. McNeil joint owners would license that wastewood yard, corner of the wastewood yard, for use by the solar test center for 5 years at no charge. The compensation to the McNeil joint owners would be that the McNeil joint owners would receive the entitlement to the energy from the solar test center. Interconnection costs would be borne by UVM. UVM will pay permitting and construction costs except for fencing and tree cutting. BED would pay for cutting of 4 trees on our property, which are on the south side of the McNeil access road. They're not on the other side of the road. And adjust the fencing in the wastewood yard to provide a secure delineation between the wastewood yard and the solar test center. The road access would be through new gates north of the wastewood yard, and the price of that is included in the fencing. So then the BED is going to purchase the energy and RECs from the McNeil joint owners at 8 cents a kilowatt hour is my best guess right now. That creates a value stream for the McNeil joint owners in return for use of the space. It creates a benefit for BED because any payments to the McNeil joint owners serve to reduce McNeil's O&M expenses, of which we pay 50% of. UVM would pay the annual maintenance costs with the solar test center equipment. BED would handle the general property maintenance as part of our McNeil site maintenance and post 5-year renewable by mutual agreement. It is expected that there would be a use agreement with additional potential users. Vermont Technical College, for example, might be a potential additional user for workforce development, things like that. But since UVM is the owner of the property and the licensee of the site, there would need to be a use agreement with UVM. They're generally amenable to that as long as it doesn't interfere with their test usage. So any questions on the location or the business structure that we're talking about while I'm on these slides? Okay.
I kind of wish I just saw sort of like a budget in terms of how much we're spending and then how much we're receiving.
Next slide. Next slide.
Okay.
So I just wanted to see if there were any questions on the business structure before I move on. So again, our benefits are a partnership in the solar test center with UVM, and Encore is going to donate some bifacial panels to allow for testing of bifacial solar arrays, and helping to maintain as much of the training capabilities that were lost when the Williston solar test center closed as we can. So for us, it would be a purchase of roughly 30 megawatt hours annually. And that is 30 megawatt hours if the racks are only half populated. It would go to 60 megawatt hours if they were fully populated. The gross payments would be $2,400 a year at 30 megawatt hours, or $4,800 per year if all racks are filled. The effective net price to BED through the reduction in the McNeil O&M moves that down to $1,200 to $2,400 a year if it's at 30 megawatt hours and 60 megawatt hours of production, respectively. We would be potential signers of the use agreement to allow us to also do research in conjunction with UVM that relates potentially to integrating storage with the grid, or storage with solar with the grid and solar and storage. So that's the rough magnitude. Is if they don't add any new solar panels, it would be $2,400 a year gross, a net cost to BED of $1,200 on our bottom line, and if they fully populate the racks, that would move to $4,800 a year or $2,400 net. So does that answer your question on the magnitude?
Yes, thanks. Another question, which is, thus far, some of the analyses regarding what might work economically for solar at the airport have not panned out to be, a net positive enough for us to be actually investing in that area. In the event it's the same with a solar plus storage here at this test center, what are the other types of research that might be done or could be done with this array at McNeil?
Well, certainly I was, again, like I said, we're not the primary owner of the array. We're buying the energy, but I was thinking in terms of potentially like EV charging integration with solar, things like that. One of the thoughts is that this, when we move the waste wood or the leaf bin, we have some open space here that could be used to put additional hardware there for testing. So the rooftop arrays aren't well positioned for that. Those rooftops are both essentially fully occupied. This would have the advantage of having some still remaining open space inside the fence perimeter.
Question. This is a test facility. Are they just going to test one set of panels, or are there going to be panels rotating through this over the 5 years?
So they've been donated a variety of panels from the existing solar test center. Not all of them, obviously. The original solar test center in Wilson was much larger. So they've been donated some of the panels, which are going to be put in purpose in use right away. Encore is donating some state-of-the-art bifacial panels, but that's the purpose of the open racking, is to allow other, technologies to be tested or other types of panels to be tested. We didn't want to basically permit it at exactly 25 kW and then not be able to add even another panel without removing one.
Yeah, because back to Gabrielle's question, if technology is really changing fast, we hope that this test facility will take advantage of that. Right.
I do, and I could say that was very much my thought about the 50% of the racking remaining open but permitted for use. So they're not going to be sitting there. It's not an array that's going to be built out fully paneled and not able to do anything without removing a panel. It's going to have some open expansion space, and this is obviously being done in conjunction with UVM because UVM is bearing the cost of all this. So Dan Harvey, for example, at UVM has been working on all of these proposals with BED.
So if UVM is on top of the research issue, they will be looking for grants to get new panels to put out there.
Correct.
Okay.
But again, we wanted to make sure that the permitting did not end up being a barrier to that.
Right. Okay.
So here's the
And one other question. You mentioned that you originally had a different proposed site, but it's 6 feet lower. What does this look like in terms of floodplain? Obviously, it's 6 feet higher, but looking at what's been going on with the lake and general water level rise, any concerns there?
It wasn't that you couldn't put the panels in a floodplain. It was that if you put them in the floodplain, you have to elevate the leading edge to be 6 feet above the flood level. So if you put them, and this hill right here is a slope up by 6 feet. So what would have happened is these panels, the leading edge of the panels would have had to have been 12 or 13 feet up in the air. They're at a much more normal level if you put them up on this area. Encore did a due diligence survey for DOE and Sandia and looked at this and noted that the two problems with the archaeology and the floodplain, and at the same time noted that moving to this site would appeared to resolve both of those issues. So here you have
even if we did have enough water level rise to potentially reach, that second site area, it wouldn't have an impact in terms of, if you have testing materials or, I know a solar array can be on a rack system and then the water level can rise. But if you have other, equipment that you're trying to figure out how it interfaces with the, panel production, then yeah, I'm just curious about floodplain levels. To
the best of my knowledge, that floodplain is addressing, I think, a 100-year issue. I don't know if this area has ever flooded. Betsy or Dave could probably answer that real quickly, but I don't think it's likely. So, but again, what we didn't want to do is have an array that was sitting there 13 feet up in the air to meet that 6-foot test.
My feeling is if that floods, we've got a lot bigger problems than the solar array.
Right.
Because
With
the whole,
MacNeil.
everything would be flooded and we'd be in big trouble.
So to the best of my knowledge, that's never flooded, correct?
In 36 years, I've never seen water in that area.
But the rules say if you're in a designated floodplain, you must have the leading edge be this much higher than. So they'd have been kind of stilty. You know, and part of it was for training purposes, they didn't want to have to use, you know, lifts and things like that to get to the leading edge of the solar array.
Okay, thank you.
And the last was just an overview of the purchase power terms. So it's a 5-year proposed purchase power agreement. The price would include the purchase of all of the attributes: energy, capacity, RECs, and transmission benefits. Again, the expected annual production is 30 megawatt hours initially, up to potentially 60 megawatt hours annually. I'm sorry, the purchase price per megawatt hour, I'm thinking it's going to be 8 cents. The MacNeil joint owners will have to agree to it. I don't think it's not big dollars for them any more than it's big dollars for us. We used the most recent IRP information to approximate the 8 cents. So the annual PPA costs, like I say, are $2,400 to $4,800 a year, you know, on a total power supply budget of, you know, 10 to 30 million or 20 to 30 million. So it's a de minimis purchase, but it does require approval because it's a 5-year term. And what we're requesting is a resolution that says that the delegate to the general manager, because there's no point in entering the purchase power agreement for the solar until we've got the license issue squared away and until they've got the permit to actually do it. Delegate to the general manager the authority to enter a 5-year purchase power agreement with MacNeil joint owners for the output of the proposed UVM-owned solar test center to be located at MacNeil at a price not to exceed $100 per megawatt hour. If it exceeded that, we'd have to come back to you. I don't think it will. I don't think it'll exceed 8 cents, but.
Question about confidentiality. If somebody sees $100, does that mean that's the price going to be? It's going to be that price? You know, you mentioned 8 cents. This is 10 cents. If the other guys see the 10 cents, does that mean it's going to be 10 cents?
Well, it's not to exceed. So again,
yeah, I see that. I see that. Is there some way to write this so that that number is not in there?
And the price, well, I don't know. Like I say, I guess if you want to delegate the authority to enter into the agreement without a restriction on price, then we could take that out.
I think it's,
Okay.
James, it's relevant right here that we're not negotiating with a traditional counterparty. We're negotiating with our joint owners at MacNeil for an arrangement that would be based on the market price, correct?
And of which we're 50% owners then as well. So, I mean,
So it's an unusual transaction.
It basically, I want it to be a reasonably set price so that there's no regulatory issue, that there's no resistance from the other MacNeil joint owners. But there's nobody who's going to be able to push me up to 10 cents. I just don't want to have, you know, a minor change in the market economics before we finalize this and have to start over again.
Okay, and my question probably has a $500 impact, so never mind.
No, Bob, it's a fair question because
Fair
if
question.
this was a traditional contract arrangement, we might treat that language a little differently. I think.
Yeah, you're a good point. I see what you're saying. Yes, I would not put a language like this for a commercial transaction that we were still negotiating.
Okay.
I'm going to be setting the price, justifying it to the other joint owners, and unless the assumptions change, it won't.
Any
That's
other
not slide.
clarification questions from the commission? I don't hear any. Would someone, assuming everybody has had their questions answered, are folks ready to make a motion? Personally, I'm fine with supporting this. I mean, 8 cents is higher than, you know, spot market price right now, but this has a different role and a different goal, and you know, connects the dots in terms of ways that we can communicate about the energy transition with other Burlingtonians and with students at local universities. And if we can figure out ways to, come up with some creative opportunities, this is a pretty small bucket or drop in the bucket in terms of our larger budget, and offers some cool potential. So,
well, to be clear on this, 8 cents is higher than the spot market price of energy. It is our current estimate of the combined value of energy, capacity, RECs, and transmission.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure. I would move that the Burlington Electric Commission delegate to the general manager the authority to enter into a 5-year purchase power agreement with McNeil joint owners for the output of the proposed UVM-owned solar test center to be located at McNeil at a price not to exceed $100 per megawatt hour.
Second.
All in favor, roll call.
Commissioner Herendeen,
Aye.
Commissioner Moody,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
Commissioner Whitaker.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, folks, for putting that together. I know, I still remember when they closed up shop over in, over on the other side of the river, and just thinking,
We talked about how to get it to Burlington, and apparently we could.
Yeah. Nice to have that connection also with Sanders to help pull it together. So next up, so thank you guys for pushing on through that. Next up, we have the commissioners check-in. Bob, you had raised several questions. I'm not sure if it makes sense to propose having some of those questions addressed right now in executive session. We could move into that, or if there might be an opportunity at the next meeting that makes more sense to plan for that. Bob, I'll ask you your input on that.
If there's an avenue for me to put the questions out in writing, I would be happy to do that. Is there? If so, then forget, we don't need a closed session now.
I think if you want to send us a note with some questions, we can certainly work to respond to those, separate from the meeting.
Or okay, fine, I'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah, the only question there is whether or not other commissioners have an interest in what the responses are in terms of NPV.
Right. In that case, we should schedule the executive session. If that's the preference of the commission, we'd be glad to do that as well.
Right. I'm certainly happy to discuss this directly with Commissioner Herendeen, to explain my point of sensitivity as to why I'm reluctant to talk about some of these things on open camera. But if we want to do it as a broadcast to the committee, I think you might be right, Darren, that we'd have to do that.
Bethany and Scott, how do you feel?
Not totally knowing the nature of Bob's question or questions. I'm open to whatever is appropriate.
Well, I can state the 15-second version of it without using any numbers. The question is to what extent the bottom line for various of our endeavors, especially McNeil, might be affected by issues outside of that bottom line regarding the welfare of the state.
Scott, did that clarify things for you?
Not really, but again.
I had a sense.
Okay, I'll go with the flow.
Bethany?
Yeah, I feel the same. I'm with Scott. I sort of don't totally understand the issue that well, so it's hard for me to to know.
Well,
That's-
here's my chance to try to make an example, and you can muzzle me if you want. If something doesn't pay according to standard economic arguments, but it's argued that it's good for employing a certain segment of the population, or it's good for overall secondary effects via multipliers in Vermont or even elsewhere, how do we balance those two issues?
Well, I think the real question is if something doesn't pay.
Well, there are different ways to calculate paying them. That is the issue.
Correct.
Right. I mean, hence the world of externalities. But I think with this case, I mean, we know that the ED doesn't necessarily get any form of credit and the joint owners because it's, supporting forestry management and that, forest industry. There is no payment to the utility for that. So I would be looking strictly at the bottom line of the plant itself. I'll throw something out there. I would be interested in participating in this conversation, and I think two commissioners can have a conversation with James and be fine as long as it's not three. Bethany and Scott, if you're comfortable with Bob and I having a chat with James, we can do that separately, and I'd be happy to follow up with each one of you separately via a direct phone call if that's helpful.
Yeah, let me say also, this is not something I've been obsessing about. It came up with the McNeil report and especially in the BED's response, which is a 3-page report, which has been sent out to everybody.
Yep.
Anyway, what you propose is fine with me, Gabrielle.
Yeah, that's fine with me as well.
Yeah, same here.
Okay, great. Lori, maybe you could help. I'll figure out a time with Bob, James, and myself.
I sure will.
Thank you. And then just, James, if you don't mind making sure that we have an IRP presentation as part of the next agenda, that would be very appreciated. And hopefully by then, some of us, including me, will have had a little bit of time to delve in.
Yeah, and at this point, I think you've all been hopefully now emailed the link to the IRP website.
Yes. Yep. I did have one other question though for the commissioners. We're meeting at 2:00 right now. Does that work for people who might have 9 to 5? Is this okay? Is there a preference?
This is Bob. On the other hand, I probably am more flexible than anybody. So let me admit that. But if it were later, that would be fine with me.
I'm flexible. I'm fine with it. I'm glad you brought this up, Gabrielle, because I did have one. Despite our historic not having people in the public at any of our meetings, and I still just point out that this is changing, and I'm not sure how long you want to go on with at this time of day, but it does kind of go against the traditional 5:30 when people would expect to log in or join in, even though I take that with our historical data fully aware, but just pointing it out is.
Yeah, that's on my mind as well. Bethany, do you have a preference one way or another?
Yeah. So a little bit later in the day would be easier, just because breaking up the afternoon's a little bit challenging, but I also have flexibility.
Okay. Well, why don't, does all the information online say we meet at 5:30? Does anyone know?
I join the meeting every month with the time on the website.
Okay. What we could do is just shift it a little bit earlier, so it's 5. And that way, members of the public can join. But it's also, for the BED staff, it's not quite as extending as late into the night potentially.
Okay.
Does that work for people? And that way, Jim, for example, wasn't able to join today. So.
Right, even 4:30 might be reasonable, most, but 5 is good.
Let's go with 5 because technically, if the world opens up, that's when a lot of people finish. So we'll go with that. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We will need a motion to adjourn, assuming there's no other comments for commissioners check-in.
I move that we adjourn.
A second.
Second.
All in favor, roll call.
Commissioner Herendeen,
Aye.
Commissioner Modi,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
Commissioner Whitaker.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned, 3:32. Thank you.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys. Right.
Bye-bye.
Be well.